got some coffee here. It's peppermint mocha creamer. I love it. Refueled, shook it out, and we're gonna start the cons now. I already said this, but I feel like I need to say it again, just because I know how people can be sometimes. This is my experience. This is my opinion, what I noticed. I don't know everything about the world or about Japan. I was there for 1 year as an English teacher living in Tokyo. So that's my experience. That's where I'm coming from. And these are just things that I noticed. So one thing is, as Japan can be convenient, like I said, it can also be very inconvenient. And when I say that, I am referring to conducting business. So I had a hard time because a lot of things are done in person and on paper. And it's hard to get things done online. And especially if you don't speak Japanese or can't write in Japanese, some forms won't even let you input English characters. So my name on some forms would not work. And so I'd have to translate it into Japanese, and then that's a whole legal thing because that's not legally my name. So on legal documents, I had to put it in English, but it wouldn't read it in English. Sometimes I found myself going around in circles a lot because of this whole language barrier thing and the fact that the forms are all on paper or just not accessible to other languages or other inputs. And it was also difficult to have to go in places and conduct business rather than going online because I worked a full-time job. Businesses close on Saturdays and Sundays. A lot of the things I needed to do, I only had Saturdays and Sundays because I was working Monday through Friday. And they're open, 9 to 5 often. And so I would have to leave to go to work at 9. So I couldn't go in, and then they'd close before I got off work. It's hard to get things done sometimes in Japan because of the way that's set up. I just found myself constantly struggling to get business done that I needed to get done. So I found that there was a cultural pressure to kind of stay in line, as it were. And like standing out or being too different from everyone is not seen favorably. These are just two small examples that have to do with like what you wear. I was told by some of my Japanese friends that like when you wear sunglasses out in public, you're kind of seen and perceived as like you're acting cool. You think you're too cool for school, basically, which is like, okay, whatever. I guess I don't really care what people think of me, but I guess it's hard. It's sad to think that people would presume I'm super arrogant or aloof or whatever because I'm wearing sunglasses and I have like blue eyes and I need them even when it's cloudy. People don't really wear sunglasses there, and so when you do, it's just kind of like odd or whatever. You're giving off a vibe, I guess. And how it's definitely still like a modesty culture, and so if you are gonna go against that and wear anything that kind of as a woman reveals like your collarbone area or cleavage or like your shoulders or anything, that's very provocative. And coming from a culture where people show a lot more, I wear tank tops all the time, and I sometimes wear crop tops, and so it kind of feels like I don't want to offend anyone or give off a wrong vibe, but I want to be comfortable. And those are just two examples because I ran into it mostly with the fashion choices. I would find myself kind of just conforming because I don't want to stand out too much. That also goes into my next point, though, about lifestyles. So in Japan, there are definitely like alt lifestyles, just like there are everywhere, and communities where you'll see more out there things or things that are different from the norm, for sure. But I feel like there's more cultural pressure there from my observations to kind of stay in line and do the normal thing and don't be weird and don't step out of line and do the expected thing. I have kind of this like granola personality. Like I love backpacking and, camping in my car and road tripping and the homesteady thing. I like growing my own food, and I used to have chickens and like this kind of, I'd love to build a tiny house and have chickens and goats and live on some land and all this stuff. I'm sort of a hippie sometimes. In my heart, I am. In my heart. I noticed that there's just this kind of cultural here's what we do and here's the template. And if you don't fit that, you're kind of ostracized socially a bit there. And I could see it, if I decided to settle there, being really difficult to live out my lifestyle choices. And I already don't fit in, in Japan. But it could be really hard to have like an alt lifestyle, whatever that would be, because the cultural pressure is so dominant. I just found that Japan was an even more kind of traditional culture than the US tends to be. We have a lot of freedoms here to express ourselves and do what we want to do as individuals. And on that note too, the Japanese are very polite in the sense that they kind of let you do what you want, but I think that you would face a lot of obstacles if you were trying to do something that really grated against the rest of society. It might not be like outwardly aggressive or antagonistic towards you, but the way society is set up, you would maybe face obstacles. The infrastructure is built around people of a certain lifestyle and a certain way of being, and that if you are outside of that, it's kind of difficult to navigate sometimes. So another thing is, don't count on English. And this is a big thing I hear all the time from people here who want to travel to Japan, who have made comments to me about, I'll get around fine, right? Because everyone speaks English. And that's not the case. I just want to say, this is Japan. There's no obligation that they have to speak a different language than Japanese. So no, not everywhere speaks English. And I would say, in fact, there are fewer people who speak English than you would expect. In the cities, yeah, you'll find people who speak English well enough and you'll get by just fine. But out in the countryside, no. And signs are not always in English. And it's just not a country that's set up to cater to English speakers. I think that when you go, you need to be aware of that and humble and do what you can to be polite in a place that is not about accommodating you. And I know that can seem really uncomfortable in some ways, but it's not your country. Fair enough. I will say, as an English speaker who doesn't speak much Japanese, it can be inconvenient and scary and frustrating to try and navigate that situation. And so I'm not going to negate your feelings of kind of frustration and discomfort, because yeah, it is. It's not your language and it's difficult. And I will just say, not speaking Japanese for me at times was really limiting and isolating, and that is completely on me. I didn't have the preparation that others have, and it was my own choice. Like, I didn't set out to really become proficient in the language or the culture before I went, and then while I was there was more work I could have done to learn the language. And so that's on me, that's not on anyone else. But I will say, if you, like me, don't have the language and you are newer to the culture, it can be hard and it can be isolating, it can be embarrassing, and I will just say that language opens doors. So just be aware, it's not English is not hugely widely spoken in Japan like it is in other countries. And for me, I put that on my cons list because that made it difficult for me, not as a statement of judgment against Japan and that I think they should speak more English. I'm just putting it in a con because it was personally difficult to navigate and that was hard. Okay, so the next one, I know I raved about how great the transport system is, but I will say, not having a car can be so limiting. I found it incredibly hard to move stuff around without a car. Sometimes when I go shopping, I wished I had a car because I'd have a bunch of stuff, or when you're moving and it would just be so nice to have a car to move, so you don't have to hire movers. And then I remember I was in Nitori, which is a big kind of like IKEA department store, and I was gonna buy a microwave and an electric cooktop. And I had to get them delivered, which was more expensive because I couldn't carry those back with me across town. I had a bunch of other stuff. And so I did find things inconvenient sometimes because I wished I had a car to load stuff up, and it would be so much easier and cheaper to do that. But I will say, Japan is very ready for that situation to occur because everyone else has to deal with it. And so the delivery and drop-off process is really streamlined. So I'll say that, but I found it kind of irritating sometimes. I just have this one line on here that says mold, and there's so much I could go into about mold, but I come from a dry climate. Moisture is not a huge issue here, but Japan is a different story. So I will tell you, this is kind of embarrassing and gross, but I will often shower at night when I have work in the morning and then braid my hair so it's like wavy and fluffy the next day, and it dries overnight. It always has, my whole life. Not in Japan. You know, summer's around the corner and it's getting more humid outside, but whatever. I braid my hair and I unbraid it and go to work, and I keep getting whiffs of something that smells kind of rancid and weird at work. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And I realize it's me, and it's my hair, and it smells mildewy because my hair had mildewed in the night because it was still damp. It was horrific and gross, and I freaked out because I thought, I've never mildewed my hair before. Do I have to cut it off? What do I do? So I think I got vinegar or something and like washed it, and it was fine. It was fine. So you can come back from mildewy hair, just so you know, if you ever end up in the situation, which I pray you don't. But it was horrific, and I did not ever go to bed with wet hair again. I went out and bought a blow dryer immediately after, and so I will warn you about that. And then midsummer, it was just so humid, like July, August especially, really humid, terrible hot month. I had my shoes all in a shoe cubby of the share house where I was living. I left on a trip, I think for like 4 days or something. I came back and I opened the drawer, and all my shoes had this little coating of gray mold on them. They were just sitting in the box and they molded in the box. And it was so gross. And I was like, how do I unmold my shoes? And I think I took vinegar or vinegar, and I just wiped them off and they were fine. I don't know, man. It was rough. You have to bone dry things or they will mold. And towels too, do not fold, or clothing. You need to dry your clothing fully before putting it away, or you are in trouble. Not a lot of places have dryers. It's just a thing in Japan. You don't have a dryer often, and you just have to air dry things. And so you need to factor that in if you're gonna be working full time and trying to do laundry, and then it's raining. You gotta factor that in and think about where you're gonna dry stuff, what day are you gonna do it on. It's gotta, in the summer, sit like a day or two before it gets put away. All these things, like climate things, that I never thought about. Of course you're moving to a different country. Of course it has a different climate. And I didn't realize how much it affected the way you live your life. Like in the little things, the way you dry dishes, the way you dry your clothes, all that stuff. So that is a con, is that things are prone to mold there. I don't miss that. I'm happy with my Mediterranean dry climate again. It's nice. I went to school in Arizona, so I've been around deserty climates my whole life, and I really like them. I miss them. So that's that. A very personally difficult thing that I struggled with was the work culture in Japan. I taught English. I worked with this company that is an after-school program for kids, and we did, immersion English. It was a much more challenging job than I expected it to be for many different reasons. The work culture I experienced was very much, from what I understand now, a typical Japanese company experience. Is you're expected to be very loyal to your company and put your company's needs kind of over your own. Unpaid overtime is the norm. Like constantly, I would find myself wanting to leave when my shift was over, but we had projects to finish or things to prepare for, and the pressure from the company and the management was such that I have worked a lot of unpaid overtime just trying to finish what there is. Like the work ethic in Japan is that if there is work to do, you need to do it and get it done. You're just expected to finish it. And so I a few times would, supposedly get off at 8 p.m. and be working till 9 or 9:30 on things, and feeling really resentful and frustrated that that was the way it was. And I could walk out at any time, but you're judged and you're viewed as you don't have a good work ethic. There were also just limited options for me as someone who didn't speak Japanese. This is my own fault. It's just like my experiences. I don't speak Japanese, and so I couldn't just quit and go get another job that I really enjoyed. Like, kind of what it felt like what you can do in Japan if you don't really speak Japanese is teach English. That's what you do. And a lot of these companies are this way. It's just kind of how they're run. There are companies now that are becoming very popular that actually help you quit your job for you, because apparently intimidation is a huge problem, where your company will intimidate you into staying and bully you into not quitting. Luckily, I didn't have that problem. And often, too, you would use your own money to go buy stuff on work time, but they would send you out to buy stuff with your own money because the budget wasn't ready, and then they would reimburse you when they could. And that just felt weird to me, and everyone treated it as normal. It's like you have to give your life to your job. And I'm not about that. I don't like that. It's not comfortable for me. It's not what I want. But I did it, and I just had to do it to get by. And I'll tell you, that was not fun for me. That's on my cons list because in the immortal words of a friend of mine who is Japanese, Japan is an amazing place to travel, but not to work. So if you're thinking about moving there, this is just one girl's experience working in Japan. But if you read the stories of other English teachers, I'm not alone. This isn't something I'm making up. This is a real issue in Japan. I'm sure if you have the language, your opportunities are going to open up a lot more, and then it might not be this way. I don't know what to tell you. That's just my experience, and I know I didn't like it, and it was hard. Not to say I didn't like every moment at my work, and there were some wonderful things that came out of it. So I'm glad I did it, but I would not do it again. Hello! It's obviously a different day because I chopped some more of my hair off and I'm wearing something different. But I had a few more things on this cons list that I didn't get to that I want to highlight now. The next thing is that in Japan, for me, it always felt like there were people around and I could never be in a private place. Even in places where I was alone, it never felt like I was remote. I did go on some hikes where I was definitely out there, but compared to my life here in the US, I definitely felt like there were just more people around all the time. And sometimes I just found myself wishing I could get some quiet alone time out in the world, and that felt a little bit harder to find for me. The next thing is that I noticed fruit is very expensive in Japan. And like I mentioned in my pros video, I really liked how seasonal everything was. But even so, fruit is kind of a luxury item in Japan. And as someone who really, really loves fruit, that was very hard. And I found myself just not eating as much fruit. Part of that is that fruit is perfect in Japan. Like, only the really good stuff that's not blemished or gross is going to be on the shelves. And so when you buy fruit, you're getting like the best tasting, really good version of that fruit. So that is, you're getting like the premium version of a fruit every time you buy one. Here in California, I can get kind of most fruits year round, but sometimes they just don't look great. They're blemished, they've got mold spots, or they're kind of mushy. I hardly ever encountered that in Japan. Okay, the next thing is that I found it kind of harder to make friends in Japan because culturally people are less chatty than they are here in California and in lots of places in the US. You start a conversation with a stranger, that's not that out of the ordinary. You remark on the weather, you remark on some random thing, and you could start a whole conversation with someone. And then honestly, in my life, I could start a conversation with someone and maintain it enough to get to some kind of common ground where we both go, hey, are you on Instagram, or what's your number, or, you know, oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you, like we should hang out sometime. And that type of interaction hardly ever happened for me in Japan. It's just not a cultural thing over there to just start random conversations with people. And it does happen, and it did happen to me, but not to the same degree as here. And it's not as easy to just generate that kind of relationship and that kind of casual talk that then could lead to some more depth later on. It's just harder to randomly connect with a stranger over there. And that was lonely. It really was lonely. And I'm sure if I spoke Japanese, it would be a whole lot easier. But even so, there is still that thing that it just isn't the same. It's not like you just start up a random conversation and then you become friends. And that does happen over here. And that's something I really do appreciate about living here. At the end of all this, I sit here and I'm looking at the end of my list and remembering that there are probably so many more things that I could go into about pros and cons and my experiences in Japan. And I'd love to talk more about that. I feel like I haven't fully processed the year by any means, and it's nice to share my experiences of Japan. So if there's something specific that you want to know about, please ask that down below, and I will see if I can answer it. I think at the end of this year experience, I just have learned a lot about how no country is perfect, and you have to really factor in what is important to you in your life and where enables you to live that life that you want to live. And there will be things that you have to accept and swallow that you don't like in order to be there in any country. So wherever you want to be, you have to accept the bad that comes with it. But what are the good things that you want in your life, and where can you most fully live that out and express yourself and feel safe and comfortable? Japan will always be a place that I want to visit and keep coming back to because I love it as a country, and it's beautiful and wonderful and imperfect and challenging and wonderful all at the same time. And I said wonderful a lot. And I mean it. It is. And there will always be other things that I think of that I didn't get in this video, and this is an imperfect video. It's just my experiences and me doing the best I can to synthesize those and be fair about the pros and the cons. And for me, what was a pro or a con might not be that for you. I would really love to hear what you think of Japan, if you've been there, if you want to go there, if you live there. I hope that this is a fair evaluation. This is my opinion, but I hope that I did it justice and wasn't unfair in any of my points. And I hope that I get some engagement on this. I want to hear what you're thinking, all of you, about this, and did this spark ideas for you, or life experiences that you've had that may be the same as mine or different. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for taking this long time. If you made it this far, I applaud you. It was a long slog for me, and I'm sure for you too, but I really appreciate it. And stay tuned for the next one. I'll be doing kind of less and less content surrounding Japan as I just get more settled here in my life in the US. I want to focus on things here, but it still remains something very dear to me. I still have a few more projects that I want to do surrounding Japan, so we'll see if that happens and when that happens. But anyway, stay tuned for the next one. I am planning on doing some videos surrounding more outdoor stuff coming up. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you out there.